Hi everyone, my name is Marte Abawaji. I'm the head of community engagement at Springtide Research Institute, and we have an Instagram live conversation that I'm really excited to have today. It's with one of our research advisory board members, Kenji Kuromitsu. Kenji's right here, so I'm gonna Kenji introduce himself. He occupies a number of different roles, a number of different spaces. Hello, good afternoon, Kenji. I hear you great.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Welcome. So I am so
Awesome.
pleased to get to talk with you during this lunch hour. It's lunch, at least for us. I'm coming from Baltimore. You're in Chicago, right? Great. So
Exactly. Lunch for
those
us
in
as well.
Mountain and Pacific, maybe you get a little pre-lunch break in to join us live, but this conversation will also live on beyond this live moment. But Kenji, could you just introduce yourself? And you wear many different hats. So what are some of those?
Yeah, sure. It's nice to
Is
see
it
you.
really?
This is also my first
Okay.
Instagram Live, so it is.
Are you
I've never
serious?
watched
Well,
one. I've
you're
never
already
been on
doing
one, so
great if you've never even
oh,
watched one.
yeah.
Thank you for letting Springtide be your
Thank,
first.
of course, I'm really excited to be here. Let's see, some of the Kenji Kuromitsu, I use he, him, his pronouns. Some of the professional roles that you talked about, Marta, I work full-time as a behavioral health provider at a federally qualified health center here in Chicago. So those are government-funded clinics that serve vulnerable populations. So we do a lot of work with the LGBTQ community in particular. I have a few hours that I do at a private practice, working with individual patients as well, providing behavioral health. And also have a background as a healthcare chaplain. And so spiritual care provision and kind of thinking about pastoral care is something that informs not only the clinical work that I do, but also kind of consulting and organizing, especially working with young people here in Chicago. So those are with a few different kind of institutions and with Japanese American and Arab American youth in the city these days in particular. All things that I really enjoy and all things that
That
keep me
does
really, really busy
keep
as
you
well.
busy for sure, because that's a lot. In there, aren't you also teaching some adjunct courses?
That's right. So I'm adjunct professor of ministry at McCormick Seminary, where I went to school. So really love the McCormick community and enjoying teaching there. I should mention too, I work with an organization called Collage, that is a organization for the children of LGBTQ caregivers. And so I've been a volunteer with them for a few years, currently on their board, and really enjoying that kind of work too. So when I'm not doing those things, I also like gardening, like music, play a lot of video games, probably too much sometimes. And I live in the South Shore neighborhood of Chicago with my partner. And we go to a
You
church
do a
in
lot,
Hyde
but you're
Park.
still making time for leisure and fun and play, whether that's video games, whether that's gardening. I love it. We, like I said at the top, we're so honored that you're a part of our Springtide Research Advisory Board. And we have this brand new report that I wanted to dive into and talk with you a bit about today. You're holding up your copy.
And my
20.
favorite color. Oh my
So,
gosh.
yes, this is the State of Religion and Young People 2021 Navigating Uncertainty. And Kenji and I are going to be talking primarily about the second part of the report. If you don't have your copy yet, you can get it free. We have free digital access thanks to a generous donor. So you can find that on our website, springtideresearch.org. But if you like the print copy, like Kenji and I just held up, we have that at a really affordable rate also because of that generous donor. And you can find that on our website as well with free shipping currently. So get in on either the digital or the print access today because it's going to coincide with everything we're talking about. But Kenji, you mentioned multiple spaces where you're interacting with young people. What draws you to work with Gen Z, where we're committed to understanding 13 to 25-year-olds?
I was thinking about this question. I think there's two things that really draw me to working with young people in the communities that I am am encountering young people both with kind of collage, with communities here, different kind of organizing or community work. One thing is that, I grew up navigating different institutions that others have experienced quite harmfully, but for me were places of safety, places of belonging, places like the church, like the Catholic Church, places like Boy Scouts, summer camps, public schools. These have been sites of violation or harm for many. And for me, they were places of mentorship and connection, and trusted adults in the way that Springtide talks about them. And so remembering some of those kind of trusted figures that I have had as a young person, and I'm only like a few years out of the range of young people that Springtide studies, so quite conscious of that too. It really makes me want to be a part of, as I can, being a trusted figure or a supportive figure in the lives of young folks, whether that be our nieces and nephews or folks in our youth group at church or young people in the communities that we are working with here in Chicago. Also just want to shout out my friends Brandon and Angie who are watching the Instagram Live. Thanks for being here. Another reason, Marte, I really am drawn to working with young folks, I was, not raised with the values that I have now. I was raised with more kind of conservative, more kind of regressive values in a lot of those faith communities or family systems that we talked about. And so it's really meaningful for me personally as well as professionally to be a part of working with young people who are developing their own understandings of identity, of community, of how to be a part of dismantling the oppressive systems that kind of mantle our world. I too get a lot of satisfaction out of seeing how Gen Z and other generations of folks are shaping this world in their own hands, not just kind of reflecting.
Well, everything you said lines up really nicely with what we want to talk about today, because Gen Z is particularly marked by the ways that they're approaching faith and community and identity, like you mentioned. And a really defining characteristic of this is what we're calling Faith Unbundled. And that is the whole second half of this report, is what is Faith Unbundled? What does that look like in the lives of young people? To give an analogy of Faith Unbundled, depending on what generation you might be in, it might be a mixtape, it might be a Spotify playlist. This is the idea that instead of just having one album you play, which obviously albums are back, how many Gen Zers actually have turntables now? So the mixtape could be super relevant right now for young people as well. But a Spotify playlist is that you can pick a song from here. You can pick a genre from here. You can mix and bundle and create your own system that speaks to your own values, your own worldview, and the places that really resonate with the identities you hold as well. Faith Unbundled looks like not a singular tradition or a singular religious institution defining the way that a young person practices or identifies as a religious or spiritual person. And we find this really exciting and hopeful, but a lot of faith leaders or adults can find it really daunting. So I would love to hear more from you, Kenji, in terms of just when you read about Faith Unbundled. I know you're very familiar with the research coming out of Springtide. How does this concept strike you?
Yeah, I can see why it's threatening to some of the folks that you alluded to, Marta. It's really interesting to me to think about this Faith Unbundled concept in light of my own experiences of growing up connected to different kinds of religious communities in which kind of variously held rigidity in different ways, right? So some of the religious communities that I found myself navigating as a young person held to this kind of didactic, more rigid model of religion and spirituality, in which there's one kind of tradition that must be confessed, one singular identity, right, sort of one box to be checked. I think there's something exciting about the kind of hybridity, the kind of mixture, or there's this, I forgot who it is, but there's this theologian. She's Presbyterian. She talks about the concept of like multiplicity in theology. And I love that the way the Springtide research talks about young people sort of fashioning and crafting their own understandings of multiplicity, of belongings of different kinds. You know, whether that be, as Casper talks about in the introduction, in the foreword to the book, wedding rituals, kind of draw from different traditions. You know, I thought about my own experience doing this and putting together a wedding liturgy that tried to honor the Episcopal tradition in which I belong, but also some of the kind of Buddhist and other Christian traditions that have impacted me and my family. I think this is particularly salient now at a time when ritual, marking major life transitions and everything from going off to college to baptisms to weddings to funerals have been a bit impeded or shredded by the COVID pandemic. One thing I'm thinking about is that communities of color, immigrant communities, indigenous communities, many of these communities may already have been doing some of those kind of more syncretic or multiplicity-oriented approaches to thinking about meaning making than we may have recognized. And so, you know, there was a wonderful event that took place, I think it was this summer online. It was about millennials in the Black church, kind of exploring, you know, different ways that some of these frameworks are already a part of many communities of practice, especially among people of color. I also think mixtapes are going to come back. I think Spotify is going to fall prey to the same hermeneutics of suspicion that a lot of our social media companies are experiencing. And I think, you know, for me growing up, there was something so lovely, so personal and pastoral even about creating a CD that one had kind of customized.
Burning those
I see
discs
them
with
nodding.
my friends'
You know exactly
favorite jams all the way. Yeah. Right.
For a trip or for a ride or something. I sense that kind of ritual in different forms also
it's really about the personalization back. But what I hear you saying there, it's not just about what's personal for me in my experience, that there's a sense of community and connection there. Especially if you're gifting this playlist to someone, or if you're creating it for a particular life event or road trip, like you said. So we really do want to define Faith Unbundled. So I've already given an analogy, but we have 4 hallmarks of Faith Unbundled, because what Springtide is really committed to understanding in this annual report that we want to produce every year that's the state of religion in young people, is what does belief look like for young people? What does identity and community, as you've already mentioned today, and what do practices, which are sometimes rituals, what do those actually look like? How are those embodied and lived out? So we're way beyond just talking about affiliation. Does this young person check or not check this box? Like you said, we want to get much more into the heart and the nitty gritty of how is faith actually lived out, and what ideas are young people grappling with, and what are they choosing to honor or practice in their own lives. So as we get even more specific on beliefs, identity, community, and practices, what those end up looking like are these 4 hallmarks of Faith Unbundled. And that is beyond just identity, we want to understand wholeness. And we have Nima Dahir, who's Muslim and also a member of our research advisory board. She's one of the practitioners that brings wholeness more to life. Instead of just understanding beliefs, what is checked or not checked, we want to understand curiosity. And we see that as the ground in which young people are approaching beliefs, is in a place of curiosity. And Reverend Sumi Kim, a Buddhist chaplain who did a live conversation with our executive director about that, and wrote more of her practitioner experience and perspective on curiosity, defines that hallmark of Faith Unbundled. For community, we see young people pursuing this in terms of connection, that there might not be a singular place where they find community, but where is the place that they are connecting to one another or connecting to trusted adults as guides, whether those are faith leaders or just other mentoring figures. And another member of our research and advisory board, Chris Stedman, who's a humanist. He's a professor, an author, a chaplain. He brings connection more to bear. And then last, in terms of practices, we see young people looking at flexibility instead of a sense of rigidity in what they're doing or not doing. And we have a wonderful rabbi in New York, Rabbi Josh, who brings this to bear in his own experience with young people. So curiosity, wholeness, connection, flexibility. These are the hallmarks of Faith Unbundled. How do you, in the roles you carry, Kenji, how do you create spaces or opportunities, relationships, communities that can hold those traits?
Marta, thanks for walking us through as well the four kind of categories of curiosity, wholeness, connection, flexibility. You know, as I was thinking about this, kind of preparing to talk today, I was really drawn to, in particular, wholeness and flexibility as things that I've noticed being really important for the young people that I'm working with, whether in a clinical context, in an organizing context, or a kind of political education environment. You know, there's a real desire, I think, for authenticity and encounters, and just reflecting on my own experiences as a young person. I feel part of the reason I've been able to feel whole and to feel that the world is a place in which I and others can be trusted and have meaning and have belonging has been in part because of what I mentioned earlier, some of those kind of trusted figures who provided that, who modeled that. You know, some of what I think I really admire about young people today that I'm working with. I think I'm too young to say young people today phrase, but about the young people with whom I'm in relationship is they seem less willing than I was as a young person to tolerate this kind of rigid box checking frame in which one has to submit to either kind of a hostile submission or open rebellion, you know, kind of bucking the system entirely. I think there's more of an appreciation for those traits that you described of curiosity, of wholeness, of connection, of flexibility, and ways that I try to model that in my work. I think these are also values that I have as a group therapist and something that I really enjoy about therapeutic work. But, you know, I think a lot about the importance of folks working with young people attending to the impact of different things, the emotional impact of conflict, of opportunities for growth, of difficult emotions, in the way that the report talks about, you know, not sort of forcing conversations where they're unneeded, but also having a willingness to tolerate and to sit with difficult affects feels really essential for folks working with young people, doing that kind of rupture and repair work, allowing feelings to be present and spoken, and creating a culture in which things don't remain unspeakable, in which there's not a replication of the family dinner table where everyone just kind of has a narrow, polite conversation that doesn't stray too close to those edges. I think communicating that kind of safety, even amidst conflict or transitions or life challenges, that they can be brought into the relationship with young people in the context of the work. That you, as a person who cares about young people, whether a niece or a nephew or your child or a friend or a mentee or someone in your youth group, that you also are durable, that you can survive difficult emotions, even kind of even really challenging ones, that you survive those kind of attacks and can remain open for relationship and for encounter. And I think it's really helpful to also think a bit archetypally, a bit mythically, when we're working with young people, that we are working with human beings who are wrestling, as we did and as we are, with huge things and ideas of self and cultural beliefs and norms. And so I think, like, you know, that sounds a bit abstract as I'm saying it, but I think that helps me to remember that we're dealing with some really primal and powerful things when we talk about belonging and community and the kind of developmental challenges that we and young people are negotiating in different ways. I think I said this when we met last in person. but I really resonate with the Frederick Douglass quote, which is a bit gendered, coming from, the 1800s. But, he says this thing about how it's easier to build strong children than repair broken men, and that we can create kind of safety and secure attachment. And, those kind of things, Marte, are, I think, what curiosity, wholeness, connection, and flexibility are inviting us to model, whether that be as a therapist working with children, a pastor or congregational or faith leader in a different tradition working with young people, or again in our personal lives, trying to be that trusted adult, so that when a young person is going through a challenge, and we reach out or they reach out, there's that kind of connection that creates the kind of trust and security that I think Springtide is wanting to foster more.
I really appreciate everything you're saying. And what I'm hearing really clearly from you is, though an adult may feel scared or even threatened by the questions or real feelings and experiences that a young person might bring, that adult can build their capacity to really sit with something that's uncomfortable, and not just sit with it, but to really remain present. So you do that. That is like your job, what you do day in, day out, often in behavioral health, and accompanying young people through processing different experiences and conversations. What can someone who, that's not their profession, they're not doing this day in, day out, they might not have the training that you've gotten to undergo through chaplaincy or through social work, how can another adult build that capacity to sit with young people in those places of wholeness and flexibility, as well as curiosity and connection?
I think the people I've really admired who seem particularly skilled at that, and from whom I would like to learn, one is my friend Mohammed, who works at an organization called the Arab American Action Network here in Chicago. Another is a former seminary classmate named Addie, who was a youth pastor at our parish for a while. Each working in very different contexts, each working in communities that, have more progressive values or ideology. And shout out to Bree, who's just joined, also to Luke, Anna, and Jordan, who are watching. It's nice to see you all. But Marte, those folks that I have witnessed working with young folks, and again, without with or without the kind of training that you're talking about from a behavioral health or spiritual care provision perspective, what I really admire about them, also about my friends in Collage, who are working with young folks from ages 4 to 18 and beyond, is their ability to stay connected, to stay in relationship, and to stay available for emotional connection in a boundaried way. But also through conflict and through difficult kind of emotional experiences. That it's such a powerful modeling I witnessed from my friends and these kind of role models, that when these difficult situations arise, either affectively or questions around ideology or theology or kind of belonging, or ways that maybe a young person comes into a relationship bringing the templates of their own kind of family system and experiences, and these figures that I just named are kind of trying to model or create a kind of reparative or different kind of way of being together. What I find so powerful is that these figures that I talked about, they don't ghost, they don't disappear from connection, they don't use these difficult conversations as an opportunity to sever relationship. I think that's one of the things that the kind of rigid model that we talked about does particularly well, is sever relationship when there is a difference in ideology and some kind of affective challenge is posed. And there's a ton of wreckage, I think, that can happen from that. So what I would say for folks who are wanting to build some of those skills is also, as I try to do, to invite feedback from the young folks that you're committed to relationship with and serving, and to, being open and really modeling for folks to be able to bring distress or frustration or all of those things, and for that to be kind of welcomed as a part of the political education or ministry or education or other kind of work folks are doing. I think teachers probably have a lot of skills in this regard too, that we would benefit from.
I really love that, because we've kind of been saying internally at Springtide that if you read this report, what we hope people come away with is a way to stay in the conversation. And the way I heard you say that is stay in relationship. And I think those really are the same essence, the same ideas, because you're right, there's more, it's easier to fracture. There's more of a path to be like, you don't ascribe to this, I guess we're going to just go different ways. And you might not be a part of our community anymore, or part of this group that meets to maybe study a text or what have you. But how can you, as a trusted adult, whether you are an educator, whether you are a faith leader, whether you're a parent or an auntie or an uncle, how can you say, I want to remain in conversation and remain in relationship, and to really make that your objective? I love that you have those people you're able to point to who really have provided that model. We hope that not only our research, but these 4 practitioners who come from different traditions, like I mentioned, humanism, Islam, Buddhism, Judaism, that they provide those models as well. I hope you have models in your life, but if you don't have those direct people that you're able to point to, like Kenji was able to, we really want the experts that we talk to expand your definition and your sense of Faith Unbundled through connection and wholeness and flexibility. And we really love asking young people for feedback too. So I want to highlight that you said ask the young people how you're doing on this, or how you might stay in conversation. Not putting necessarily the onus on them to make that happen, but ask. And that feedback part is huge as well. What else about these traits do you want to offer, or any last words of advice you want to give to trusted adults who are encountering our research or encountering the ideas of Faith Unbundled and wanting to really apply them in the communities they serve?
Yeah, thanks, Marta. I'm really enjoying this so far. And as I said, it's my favorite color. So I don't think I have any orange books that are this shape. So it's just on my desk or on my bookshelf. I would absolutely recommend folks who are wanting to either get more of these kind of frames in place for themselves, or really even deepen. What I found reading this was, Springtide's research for me helps provide empirical data and language for things that I had been experiencing without having the words to describe these phenomena. And so that's something I have found really useful about listening to the voices of young people, whether from the podcasts that you host, Marta, or that Springtide hosts, or from the literature in this report or others. I think one thing that really jumped out to me, just kind of in closing about the report, was this. It's in the first half of the publication, talks about the values gap. Young people say that they care this much about an issue, and that their faith community cares this much. And in every one of the issues that was discussed, LGBTQ inclusion, crisis, gun reform, Black Lives Matter, anti-racism work, there's this incredible gap that was identified, across different kinds of religious tradition and belonging of, what this community that, and in my tradition as a Christian, that made promises to us in our baptismal, ritual and covenant, or in other traditions that promised or vowed to be present with us as young people in the rituals, in the transitions of our lives. There's this incredible gap, apparently, in values or in commitment to dismantling systems of oppression. I think that really kind of jumped out at me and makes me think a lot more, Marta, about what you kind of reflected about how important it can be for any trusted adult, personal, professional, kind of community, any kind of settings, whether it be with kids who are neighbors to you, who you provide care for or candy for the weekend prior, and want to be in relationship with and building strong and supportive communities. One thing that feels essential is helping young folks to really believe, and for helping us to believe as trusted adults, that the relationship of concern and care that's being established is deeper than any kind of ideological conflict or divide. I've the moments in my life that have been most meaningful about that have been with family or friend or other leaders, other trusted adults, for me as a young person, even across tremendous ideological difference, when there has been that shared remembering of the care and connection that we want to establish with each other, that can kind of go underneath and inform our values, and to encounter one another in that way, that to me feels irreplaceable. And so kind of returning focus to that as much as we can, communicating our treasuring of that as much as we can is something that has really benefited me and that I've tried to model in my relationships.
Beautiful. That relationship really comes first and is the foundation for all these other conversations. We hope that you do get this free report. I mean, why not when it's a free digital download, unless you want an orange book in a unique shape like Kenji said. But we also have last year's report that really touches on a lot of relational aspects. And I think it's helpful to put maybe those two texts in conversation, or allow last year's report, which was about relational authority, let that be the foundation for then navigating uncertainty. Both annual reports from 2020 and 2021. We even have a bundle where you can get both online, super discounted with free shipping, but you could get the free digital download of last year's as well. So yeah, I like that our research really builds upon itself and the actionable insights, because what I hear you saying is how do you do relationships well? Well, that's essential to be able to accompany young people through these hallmarks of faith unbundled. So I really want to thank you for your time today, and the ways that you're helping us not just read the report, but see the ways that it can be embodied in different contexts and in different communities. Thank you for the ways you're using this in your own fields, and that you've painted a lot of ways that other trusted adults can as well.
Thanks so much, Marte, for having me on. Always fun to talk with you and
your
with
first
Springtide
Instagram
about
Live.
this work.
Love it. Fantastic. Have a great Monday, Kenji. Bye.
Thanks. You too.